Thank you. Your time, your trust, and your comments keep this community alive. As you listen, share your thoughts, feelings, and lessons below, so we can learn together. Settle in. The truth and the twist are coming. Let's get into it. I came across this story and I had to talk about it because the club scene is not even the part that bothered me most. The bigger warning sign is when somebody crosses a boundary in public, sees the hurt on your face, and still tells you that your standards are the real problem. That kind of response can make a decent person second-guess himself. Do not. A boundary is not insecurity when it protects your dignity. In this story, pay attention to the small choices after the disrespect. Those are usually what decide whether a relationship survives or quietly dies in front of everyone. Before this gets any deeper, I need you to pay attention to the signs in this story. If you've ever seen disrespect dressed up as just joking or just dancing, drop a comment right now and tell me where you think the real line got crossed. And if you want more original relationship drama, cheating karma, and Reddit-style betrayal stories told like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. My name is Amari Ellison, and last winter I was 39 years old, married for 11 years, and living in a brick row house in West Philadelphia with my wife, Nia. I worked as an assistant principal at a public middle school near Cobbs Creek, which meant my days were filled with hallway noise, parent emails, and teenagers pretending they did not care about consequences. Nia was 36 and managed partnerships for a boutique spirits distributor. She was polished, quick-witted, and excellent in rooms full of strangers. I was the steadier one between us. I liked order, black coffee, early mornings. We had built a life people respected. Not flashy, but solid. My father had helped me refinish the pine floors in our living room this summer before we married. Nia kept a fiddle leaf fig by the front window that somehow survived every season, even though she forgot to water it, and I always ended up doing it. On Saturdays, we usually split up errands. She would hit the farmer's market and the beauty supply store. I would stop at Lee's barbershop, then grab salmon croquettes from the little diner near 52nd Street, where the owner still called everybody baby. That, looking back, the trouble did not begin at the club. It began months earlier in small exchanges. I kept apologizing because I believed maturity meant patience. Nia had started guarding her phone in ways that were subtle enough to deny, turning it face down, taking work calls on the back step when it was too cold to stand outside for any reason other than secrecy, laughing at messages during dinner, then saying, "It is just industry nonsense." When I asked what was funny, I did not push because I hated becoming suspicious. I grew up around loud, distrustful relationships. The Friday it happened was the second week of February, cold enough that the bus stop signs looked frosted over at dawn. I left home before sunrise because one of our 7th graders had threatened to fight in the cafeteria, and I wanted to be there before the first bell. Nia was wrapped in our navy comforter when I kissed her forehead. Around noon, she texted, "Big client closed tonight. Celebrating after. Do not wait up." I answered with a thumbs up and went back to handling a parent conference that had already turned into blame theater. Nothing about her message. My younger cousin Jelani called around 7 while I was grading behavior reports at the dining room table. He drove trucks during the week and treated every free Friday like a prize he had personally earned. "Come out with us," he said. "Ramon's birthday. We are at that rooftop spot by the river." I almost said no. I was tired, and my idea of a perfect evening was chili reheated on the stove with a game muted in the background. Then he added, "You never come nowhere anymore." He was right about that. So I changed into dark jeans. St. was one of those polished places trying hard to look effortless. Heated rooftop enclosure, brass railings, expensive candles, and a hostess who said my name too carefully after checking the reservation list. The city lights bounced off the river, and everything inside looked golden enough to fool people into thinking they were happier than they were. I found Jelani near a standing table with his fiancée and 2 friends from his union. I had barely taken my second sip of ginger ale when I looked toward the dance floor below the raised lounge and saw Nia in a silver. I did not recognize the man at first. Tall, brown-skinned, close haircut, camel overcoat draped over a chair, expensive watch catching light every time he moved. Nia was dancing with him in a way that stripped the room of every other sound. His hands were on her waist. Not accidentally. Not a crowded club misplacement. Intentional. Familiar. She smiled up at him, then leaned back just enough for him to pull her forward again. There are moments when your body understands something before your mind is ready. My jaw tightened. My stomach dropped. Every excuse I had rehearsed for months disappeared. I stayed where I was for maybe 15 seconds, and those 15 seconds changed everything. His right hand slipped lower along her side and rested where no married woman should be letting another man get comfortable in public. Nia reached up and touched the back of his neck, like this was a language they had already practiced. She laughed at something he said, not her polite event laugh. Her real laugh, that deep one she usually saved for private moments at home. I remember feeling insulted before angry, like I had been made into a fool without my permission. Then, this is where I think a lot of people get confused. They imagine the only strong response is throwing a punch, flipping a table, becoming the loudest person in the room. I do not believe that. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is stay fully in control while everybody else loses shape. I had two choices. I could explode and give them a dramatic scene to remember, or I could stand upright and make my point without degrading myself. I chose the second option because self-respect does not need an audience, and because I was not going to. I walked downstairs slowly, shoulders square, eyes clear. The man saw me first and stepped half a pace back, but Nia kept moving until she turned and found me standing there. Her expression changed in layers. Surprise, then embarrassment, then irritation, which told me more than any apology could have. "Oh, Mari," she said, like I had wandered into the wrong room. Music thumped through the floor beneath us. I looked from her face to his hand, which had not fully left her side yet. "You said this was a client celebration." I told her. I did not realize hands-on entertainment. The man extended his hand. "Derek," he said, "we were just joking around." He were the kind of smile men use when they think charm can mop up disrespect. I left his hand hanging there. "I am sure you were," I said. Nia folded her arms immediately, shifting from caught to combative with almost impressive speed. "Do not do this," she snapped. "Do what?" I asked. "Stand here and name what I am looking at." Her eyes darted around. A few people were already pretending not to watch. Derek muttered, "I am going to grab another drink," and disappeared, which... Nia leaned toward me, voice low and sharp. "You are embarrassing me." I almost laughed, but it would have sounded too bitter. "That is interesting," I said, "because from where I was standing, you seemed comfortable embarrassing me." She looked past me toward the bar, searching for an exit that preserved her pride. "It was playful," she said. "Everybody here is networking." That word annoyed me more than I expected. Adults hide all kinds of mess behind professional language. Playful? I repeated. No, playful ends where disrespect starts. And you know the difference, Nia. You just thought I would not. She expected an argument right there. I could tell. The kind where I would say too much, too loudly, and she could later focus on my tone instead of her choices. I did not give her that. "I am leaving," I told her. "You can get home however you want." Her chin lifted. "So that is it? You came down here to act controlling and then walk out." There was the first attempt to rewrite the scene. I looked at her carefully before answering. "No, I came down here as your husband. The controlling part is you trying to." I returned to Jelani's table and told him I had to go. He glanced over my shoulder, read the room, and asked no questions in front of strangers. On the elevator ride down, I felt that ugly mixture of adrenaline and humiliation buzzing under my skin. Outside, the wind off the river slapped my face hard enough to feel useful. I sat in my car without turning the key for a full 5 minutes. A younger version of me would have driven right back up there. A reckless version might have called her family immediately. Instead, I went home, locked. Nia came in just after 1:30, smelling like perfume and rooftop heaters. I was in the den with the lamp on, still wearing my sweater, legal pad untouched in my lap. She set her purse down and did not apologize. She did not even lead with concern. "You really left me there," she said. I stared at her for a second, amazed at the nerve. Yes, I said. After watching you let another man put his hands on you, I left. She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. It was dancing. I shook my head slowly. No, Nia. She paced the rug once, then twice, gathering arguments instead of honesty. You always do this, she said. You take one thing and make it bigger because you hate my work seen. That was not true, and we both knew it. I had spent years attending her events, shaking hands with distributors, learning names, standing beside her in rooms where I would rather have been home reading. Be careful, I told her. Do not build a lie just because the truth is inconvenient. She crossed her arms tighter. I am not going to sit here and be interrogated like A. We went to bed in separate rooms without resolution. I barely slept. Around 6, while I was making coffee, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a video clip, 13 seconds long. The camera angle came from somewhere near the DJ booth, earlier in the night than when I had arrived. I watched it once with the sound off, then once more. Derek's hands were roaming with more confidence, and Nia was not only allowing it, she was guiding the tone, smiling up at him, leaning into him, making room for familiarity. Nothing explicit. Nothing. I forwarded the clip to my personal email, then set the phone face down and stood at the sink for a long minute. There's a strange shame in having evidence confirm what your instincts already knew. You feel foolish for needing proof, then foolish for hoping the proof would somehow be kinder. Nia came downstairs in one of my old college sweatshirts, hair tied up, still carrying that irritated energy from the night before. Are you making breakfast? She asked. I turned the phone around and pressed play. She watched in silence, and for the first time since the club, Who sent you that? She asked quietly. Notice what she did not ask. Not, how could this be out there? Not, I am sorry. Just, who sent you that? I said, is that really your first concern? She looked away. People record anything. I laughed once, short and cold. People can only record what you give them. She bristled. I am not going to let one clip define me. I am not defining you by one clip, I said. I am defining this moment by your choices and your refusal to speak plainly. Her mouth tightened. You are acting self-righteous. By Sunday evening, she had moved from denial to offense. That is a pattern I have since learned to recognize. Some people feel exposed and immediately search for a way to become the injured party. Nia told me I was rigid, old-fashioned, insecure about the kind of spaces she worked in. You want a wife who stays home and asks permission, she said. I almost admired the boldness of that lie. I wanted a wife who understood obvious boundaries without needing a seminar. I answered, do not confuse standards with fear. I am not scared of your world. I am. Monday morning. The consequences moved beyond our house. I was in my office reviewing attendance data when Nia called 3 times back to back. I finally stepped into the hallway and answered. She was whispering fiercely. Somebody sent that video around. People in the company have it. I leaned against the cinder block wall and closed my eyes. I did not send it, I said before she could accuse me. I know that, she replied too quickly, which meant she had already considered accusing me anyway. Her human resources department wanted a meeting that afternoon because Derek's firm was a vendor under negotiation. That night she came home furious, not humbled. They put me on leave, she said, dropping her work tote, so hard the strap snapped against the floor. Administrative leave over a clip from a private event. I was at the kitchen counter, slicing red, onions for spaghetti sauce, and the smell stung my eyes. It was not private if a room full of people saw it, I said. She slammed the refrigerator door. You sound happy. I set the knife down carefully. No, I sound unsurprised. There is a difference. She stared at me like she wanted me to rescue. Honestly, I need to pause here because this part always gets under my skin. There are people who think accountability is cruelty when it finally reaches them. I do not. If anything, I think delayed accountability is what confuses people into believing they got away with something harmless. At this point, I would not have comforted her the way some husbands might, not because I lack compassion, but because compassion without truth becomes permission. Ask yourself this. If somebody publicly crossed a line, then came home demanding your sympathy before offering your respect, what exactly would you be rewarding by rushing? Nia's mother called me the next day while I was parked outside school before dismissal. Ms. Bernice had always been warm with me, a church hat on Sundays, hard candy in her purse, and opinions delivered like facts. Her voice sounded tired. "Baby, what happened?" she asked. I chose my words carefully because I was not interested in recruiting allies. "You should ask your daughter for the full story," I said. She exhaled deeply. "I tried. I am getting edited pieces." That told me all I needed to know. Nia was curating her version already, shaving off details that made. Wednesday evening, I sat across from a divorce attorney named Carla Benton in an office near City Hall with wide windows and terrible coffee. She was direct, which I appreciated. "Do you want punishment?" she asked. "Or peace?" "Peace," I said immediately. "Then move like a man who means it," she replied. We discussed timelines, finances, and what separation would practically require. She did not dramatize anything. She simply laid out the road. The meeting steadied me. I was not acting from wounded pride. I was responding to a pattern of disrespect, then dishonesty, then deflection. Those are not When I told Nia I had spoken with an attorney, she laughed first, then studied my face and realized I meant it. "Over dancing?" she said. "You are really about to blow up our marriage over dancing?" That repeated word irritated me more each time, because it was doing too much work. "No," I answered. "Over how easily you cross a line, and how hard you are working not to call it one." She went still. "So you are perfect now?" "Not even close," I said. "But I do not need to be perfect to know when I am being." The next week was a campaign. That is the only word for it. She made my favorite lemon pepper wings from the place on Haverford Avenue and played them at home like a peace offering. She asked whether we could restart our evening walks in Clark Park. She sent old photos from our anniversary trip to New Orleans with captions like, "We were so good once." If I had not known her so well, some of it might have moved me, but the timing felt strategic, not tender. There's a difference between remorse and management. Remorse tells the truth. I got my answer on Thursday morning. I had come back inside because I forgot my school ID badge on the console table. Nia was in the breakfast nook on speakerphone with her best friend, Tasha, speaking in that low, practical voice she used when solving problems. "He is calmer now," she said. "If I keep him emotional but not decisive, he will stall. Once enough time passes, this will just become a rough patch story." I stood there unseen for 2 full seconds. Here my marriage reduced to strategy. Tasha said something I could not catch. Nia replied, I walked into the room then. Nia jerked so hard her chair scraped the floor. Tasha's voice vanished into silence from the phone speaker. I picked up my badge and looked at Nia without raising my voice. "That would have worked better if you had actually been sorry," I said. She flushed and reached for the phone. "You were eavesdropping." "No," I replied. "I was coming to work in my own house." Her eyes narrowed. "You are twisting this." That sentence almost made me smile. "No," I said again. "I am finally done being twisted by it." Then I left. Once the papers were filed, the mood in the house shifted from tense theater to open hostility. Nia stopped trying to soften me and started trying to frighten me. She said she would fight for the house, question my schedule, tell people I had always been emotionally cold. The problem with lies is that they sound impressive until they meet records, witnesses, and history. I had years of texts, calendar logs, mortgage payments, family photos, and the quiet reputation of a man who showed up. I did not threaten her back. I simply documented everything and kept moving. Panic is, her job situation worsened before the month ended. The company concluded that her conduct with a vendor representative compromised negotiations, and they terminated her. She came home carrying a cardboard box with a framed certificate, a desk plant, and the gold stapler she used to joke was the nicest thing management ever gave her. I took no pleasure in that sight. She sat at the dining table and cried with her hand over her mouth. Real tears now, stripped of strategy. "They threw me away," she whispered. I stood by the sink, feeling sympathy and distance at the same time. Losing the job should have humbled her. Instead, it made her reckless. She started spending like the numbers in our account were a rumor. She did not have to believe. Salon appointments, online shopping, expensive dinners with whichever friend still answered, all while unemployment paperwork sat untouched on the counter beneath grocery coupons. When I brought up budgets, she snapped, "You're not my father." "No," I said, "I am your husband for a little while longer, and this debt is still attached to both our names." She opened 2 new credit cards without telling me. Carla called it financial. The social fallout arrived in slower, meaner ways. Couples we had known for years stopped inviting her to things, but kept texting me fishing questions in careful language. Her committee at church moved her off the spring gala planning team after restructuring responsibilities. She laughed about that at first, but I could see the humiliation under it. At a fish fry fundraiser in the basement fellowship hall, I watched 2 women greet her politely, then immediately turn their backs to continue a conversation. Nia noticed too. Public shame is strange. It does not always roar. Sometimes it comes as lowered. One Sunday after service, Deacon Freeman stopped me near the side exit while children ran past in bright Easter shoes. He was a retired postal worker with a careful way of speaking that made every sentence sound weighed. "Brother Omari," he said, "people are talking and I do not need details. I just want to ask whether you're keeping your head." I appreciated the question because it centered my conduct, not gossip. "Yes, sir," I told him. "I am trying to move clean." He nodded once. Good. When humiliation enters a house, pride usually rushes in after it. By then, I had also started therapy, which I recommend more than dramatic revenge every time. My counselor, Dr. Webb, was a black man in his 50s with patient eyes, an office full of jazz records. On my second visit, he asked, "What hurt more, the touching or the denial?" I answered too fast. The denial. Then I sat back, surprised by my own certainty. The touching was the event. The denial tried to make me distrust my own mind. He nodded like he had expected that. "Betrayal is painful," he said, "but being told your pain is illegitimate." The one thing I refused to let collapse was my work. Teenagers do not care that your marriage is unraveling. They still need hall passes, conflict mediation, and somebody to notice when they stop turning assignments in. In a way, that steadied me. One afternoon, while supervising dismissal in the sleet, I watched a 7th grade boy offer his umbrella to a girl who had just cursed him out an hour earlier in science. Kids can be funny like that, tender without meaning to be. I remember thinking adulthood should make us better at respect, not worse. That thought followed me. 2 months into the process, Nia changed tactics again. She requested mediation and showed up looking softer than I had seen her in weeks. Hair pulled back, no bright lipstick, voice measured. She said she wanted peace. She said she recognized she had handled things badly. Carla squeezed my forearm under the conference table once, lightly, not as a signal of surrender, but as a reminder to listen without drifting. I did listen. Then Nia added that my rigidity around social expression had contributed to her feeling unseen. There was again accountability with a trapdoor. I knew then what finally broke her family's full support was not the club video itself, but the lies around it. Her brother Malik called me one evening after arguing with her. He sold kitchen equipment across Delaware and always sounded like he had just parked somewhere loud. "I told her to stop blaming you," he said bluntly. "She keeps talking like you humiliated her by existing." I rubbed my forehead and stared at the rain streaking our window. I never wanted her humiliated. I said, I wanted her to be honest. Malik was quiet for a second. "That is the problem," he replied. Honesty would. The settlement took nearly 6 months because Nia fought every valuation like fairness itself was an insult. The house, my pension, her retirement account, the car she insisted was solely hers despite the joint payments, even the record player my uncle left me. But facts have a stubborn dignity. Documents, timestamps, receipts, and plain arithmetic slowly narrowed her room for invention. I stayed in the house, kept paying what I was supposed to pay, and let Carla do the arguing. People think strength is constant intensity. It is not. Sometimes strength is boring. Sometimes it is simply refusing to turn. Around that time, I started hearing from people who had seen Nia and Derek together before that night, not in scandalous settings. Industry happy hours, an after-conference cigar lounge, a summer tasting event at the Navy Yard. Each account was small enough to dismiss alone, but together they formed an outline I could no longer ignore. She had not stumbled into a reckless moment. She had been feeding one. I chose not to confront her with every rumor, because I no longer needed more evidence to leave. That mattered. Once you have enough truth to protect yourself, gathering extra pain. The divorce was finalized on a wet Tuesday in October. We stood in a conference room with paper cups of stale coffee, signed where we were told, and avoided each other's eyes except when necessary. Nia looked tired in a way makeup could not solve. Not broken, exactly, just worn down by resistance. On the elevator ride to the lobby, she finally said, "I did not think you would really go through with it." I looked straight ahead at the floor numbers, lighting up. That is part of the problem. I told her. You kept mistaking my calm for weakness. I moved into a smaller place in Mount Airy with a narrow front porch and radiators that clanked all night like annoyed ghosts. It was not the house I had planned to grow old in, but it was peaceful. I bought a used bookshelf, hung my Howard University print over the mantel, and relearned how to come home without bracing first. Some evenings I walked to a corner store for ginger beer and watched neighborhood boys practice jump shots under the streetlight behind the rec center. Healing was not dramatic. It looked like new routines, quiet meals, clean sheets, and Nia's life kept shrinking before it stabilized. Without her old salary and with debt crowding her credit, she moved from our row house to a luxury apartment, then from that apartment to a plain one-bedroom over a dry cleaner in Winfield. A mutual friend told me she had started freelance brand consulting, mostly for small restaurants and one hair care startup. I did not celebrate any of that. Consequences are not entertainment when you once loved the person living through them. But I also did not confuse compassion with reversal. You can feel sorry for somebody and still know they arrived where. Nearly a year later, I ran into her outside a Saturday jazz set at a cafe near Germantown Avenue. The air smelled like coffee and rain on the pavement. She wore a long wool coat and looked older around the eyes, though maybe grief just sharpened certain faces. We stood under the awning while traffic hissed by. "I was stupid," she said finally. Not just that night. After. I believed she meant it this time, which was both sad and useless. "Yes," I answered. Not cruelly, just plainly. She nodded, then said, "You deserve better than how I handled it." What stays with me is not the image of Derek's hand on her side. It is a feeling of watching Nia see me standing there and still choosing irritation over remorse. That was a real ending. Even if the paperwork took months to catch up, the club only exposed what her character under pressure would do. Mine got exposed too, and I am grateful for that part. I learned I could be wounded without becoming reckless, firm without becoming cruel, and finished without becoming bitter. Let me know what you would have done. Me, I chose dignity first, and this situation just shows that public disrespect rarely destroys a relationship by itself. The real damage comes when the truth gets followed by minimization, strategy, and blame. Omari did not collapse, beg, or perform toughness for strangers. He stayed measured at the club, recognized the speakerphone manipulation, got counsel, and moved carefully. That matters. Boundaries are not loud by definition. Sometimes they sound like, "I heard enough," and then a door closes. Think about that silver blouse, that speakerphone call, and that elevator line about calm being mistaken for weakness. Those little moments told the whole story long before the divorce papers did. If this story showed you anything, it is that disrespect usually starts small, but the consequences do not stay small for long. If you made it all the way to the end, comment dignity first, so I know you were here. And if you want more powerful relationship drama, cheating exposure stories, Reddit karma stories, and original narration like this, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that hit hard and stay with you. The end.